house so well. Painting here to the left, the beautiful Stations of the Cross, which I may make a comment now about how they originally were painted different colors, and then they were painted over at that time when that was going on with restoration. Rather than restoring to the original, they were painted over. Maybe someday they can be restored to the original colors. But the story I want to talk about is how every time I look at them, I think they match the original altar that was up at the front. And Jim Jarboe told me the story of how one time a couple of them fell off the wall, and then he had to painstakingly glue them back together. And I think that was a real labor of love that says a lot about the care and love that Jim Jarboe has for this parish. Ben is running the vacuum cleaner. Beautiful how the light comes in. There's Francis.
Yeah.
And we have two new people now. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Lee Canoe. My husband's Vincent.
I'm Pete Canoe.
Okay.
A Canoe.
There you go.
Then the grotto.
You'd like to talk about the grotto?
Well, my father was very much in love with Mary, and he built this for my mother, and I think it was built before they got here in about 1945. There's a hole here and a hole here, meaning you could actually have running water through here. His oldest daughter he named Bernadette. And it's been here since I was born, so it's probably been here since 1945, 1946.
Wow.
And then
Get a close-up of that.
doesn't come out anymore.
That's what's nice about Holy Trinity. This has been, how long has this grotto been here?
I'm guessing 1945.
1945, so that's about 56 years ago. And what's nice about Holy Trinity, it'll probably be here 56 years from now. There's our buddy, Jesus.
And that was donated by Shirley Freese's family. And I don't know the history about it. She had Barb Pierce write up a little history about it, but it was donated by her family.
Beautiful statue.
You tell about the square house.
Okay, we're moving over down.
When Mary was up front, my father, out of love of his wife, made my mother a rosary. Out of the love that she had for him, she placed the rosary in Mary's hand. This is not the original rosary. This is one that my father built. It's yours. when up front, when the statues went from the front to the back, then I took the rosary out of Mary's hand, and I have it. It'll be in the artifacts. But it's just the love story of my father and my mother, where he loved Mary, and he showed his love for his wife by making a rosary, and she showed her love for him by placing it in Mary's hand. And that is...
How long was it there, Princess? Until
that
after
was-
he died?
Oh, after, whenever the statues moved from the front to the back. is when-
Actually, the red rosary hung there from probably 1953 until
Red. Longer than that one.
what year?
Dad died in 1981.
In 81. The red rosary hung there from 52 to 81.
And, you know, Dad loved rosaries.
Well, he loved the Blessed Mother, and he always did the rosary on the way to work.
The other thing is the house slippers. This is a story that when the statue came, he had broken feet. And the feet were broken. Father John Lenkowski couldn't do toes, so he made sandals. That's why she has sandals. House slippers or sandals on rather than toes, because he couldn't mold the toes. Or else it would have looked like this.
Okay. So, over here is Joseph now,
With toes.
with toes,
Mary.
and Mary with house slippers. And we're going to stop the camera here for a minute now. Go.
Okay, confessional went to right here. Okay, this little atrium right here, set right here, and that's where the forgiver went in, right here. This little atrium was on right here, that's where the sinner went in, right here. And you can see a line right here on the wall, right there, and that was the end of the confession right there. And then this area here was all open, and we have absolutely no storage whatsoever here in the church. So Wainwright, my dad, built this here was storage space for in between the confessional business. It was just a dead area.
Didn't the cabinet that's over in the room set there?
Well, that's back
Or up there?
I don't know where. I think it's that.
You know, you have that oak cabinet that's right inside the furnace room. And we're in the debate, and it's set up there, set in one of those two places. And the ladies would put the vases, the vases would be underneath. And I remember having to get them out, and Dad had gladiolas, and we'd have to bring them up here and get the vases, put gladiolas for flowers for the church. So,
Let's go to the doors.
here's the doors.
Okay, this right here is where the doors that are up in the bell tower, that's where they hang. It's right here.
The interior doors that we had looked up in the bell tower,
Up in the bell tower.
they were right here where you're standing,
Yes, right here.
and then behind you are the exterior doors.
In there, both the same pattern.
So that was probably what, in cold weather, you could keep the cold wind out by shutting the interior doors when people were coming into the church?
Yeah, it's just basically a breezeway, a windbreak, you know, just like any other commercial building, you know.
Okay.
That's a little vestibule. Oh, I know.
That's all you know. I bet you know a lot more than that.
And there actually used to be lights on there too, didn't they?
Lights on where, Francis?
On posts, had lights on them.
I know.
Oh.
I remember that.
And we're done.
We're done.
Okay. Today is Monday, April 9th, 2001. We're picking off where we left off yesterday with Francis and Ben Canoe are here inside the church.
Okay, the church building basically stayed the same up until 1960. other than painting. Before that, I don't ever remember all the fancy paintings on the ceiling that was here before that. So apparently, the reason why they painted over some of this stuff would be because they fired the furnace with coal, so there's a lot of coal soot, smoke, things like that. So before the 60s, the church needed to be repainted, so we lost a lot of the murals on the walls by then. But in about 1960, there was a major remodel job with we lost the big altars. The reason why they decided to take the big altars out, they were painted white with a lot of gold leaf painting on it, and it was just too expensive to have the things repainted. In the 60s, they decided to throw out the old, go with the new, and so they decided to tear out the main altars. They tore them out and replaced them with oak plywood altars, which were very bland, very plain. There was 3 altars, 2 side altars, just held the statue. And then the main altar had an enclosement for the tabernacle. Let's think.
Francis, would you like to hop in there?
Well, I think,
Yes.
I think, the changes that I have really witnessed and seen, it's all the wood was all natural, was all finished. And then during the 60s, it was all stripped and painted. And I think that was one of the saddest things, that I remember. I remember the center of the church, there was a chandelier. It was a very simple chandelier. It had a chain, literally a chain pending down with a ring of lights. It was probably 6 lights, maybe 8, what did you say there? And it was very simple. And I remember in the renovation when they came in, and one Sunday the chandelier was down and it was bought with new lights. The new lights now are 40 years old, but the lights were just in boxes, and it was just quite a change. There were lights on each side of the sanctuary to light the area. There were lights under what we were thinking is the first and third stations, and they were fluorescent lights,
2 feet long.
2 feet long, just short lights, and would light up the sides. As you can tell, there's chimneys on both sides. You can see that probably the first heat in the church was probably 2 wood stoves, 2 pot-belly stoves, and you can still see the plate on that side where the flue went out. So I think the heat started with a couple pot-belly stoves, and then it went to a coal furnace downstairs, and then from the coal furnace it went to a fuel oil furnace, and then from the fuel oil furnace it went to a gas furnace. And I think in our little adventures here a little bit we'll see where things used to be and how they progressed. And it's the main thing is that years have changed. The painting went from different people, different parishioners, different priests, painting to and then eventually getting done professionally. And renovation in the 60s, when they went to the oak altars, we had 3 paintings over each altar, over Mary, the middle altar, and over St. Joseph. the
Tell what
60s.
the paintings look like.
You're better at that. Okay, as you direct me, I'll point the camera to which paintings were located where.
On the right-hand side, or left-hand side rather, was Mary's, and there was a round ball with a strip through the center of it with a crucifix. And then on top of the ball there was a crown, like the Queen of Heaven, you know, and then with sort of raisins came down onto the statue of Mary. Then above the main altar, there's three rings, like the Holy Trinity ring, and one of them had a cross, one of them had a PX on it, and the other one had a dove, which signifies the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And then on the right side over St. Joseph, I do not have a picture of that, but I think it was something like a Solomon square painted on the walls with raisins coming down to St. Joseph. And then in the 60s, there was wainscot all the way around, even with the bottom of the windowsills. Okay, it was all fully loose. My guy, the plaster behind it was from them. So they took off all the wainscot and patched the plaster. And then maybe a foot higher than the windowsills, they stenciled, like the three rings and crosses all the way around the church. It was just painted all the way around the church, like that.
Could you please explain wainscoting?
Okay, wainscoting is basically pieces of one by tongue and groove. I never forget it. It was tongue and groove. It came up to this height right here. It was 6 inches wide, and there was routers grooves in it. Of course, they didn't have routers then. I don't know what they used at that time, but there was little grooves in it. Basically, like 1x6 car siding or something like that.
Okay. And that went all the way around the church, both sides?
It went down both sides and all the way back into the vestibule.
Do you know what happened to all this wainscoting and then all those old altar materials?
All the wainscoting, I mean, that probably went to the trash. But all the altars, ever since we thought that they would be blessed, we burned them in my father's yard.
They were burned where?
In my dad's yard.
I see.
Because we thought they were blessed, and it's the only way to do.
What about the original relics that were in the old altars?
The original relics that were in the main altar was transferred into the new oak altars that now into the walnut altar.
Do you know what the relics are? Do you know the saints they're from?
I had heard, but I'm not really sure. I can probably call them, who they are. Okay. The oak altars lasted until probably 1967. And then we got a parishioner who did, Luke Pensionoff, that worked at the seminary mill in Edinburgh, is the walnut capital of the world. And he thought it was really a shame that the church had those altars in the walnut capital of the world. So he arranged to get the walnut from the West, and they took it to Carl Fox Company here in Guatemala. And Carl Fox actually built the walnut altars. If you look through the realtor and if a house has Carl Fox cabinets, as they mention it, that's really something to say. We have Carl Fox cabinets, so we can really say that we got Carl Fox altars.
Okay. And wasn't, I remember maybe 7 years ago, wasn't this current altar cut down?
Yes. The Paul came here, I don't know if there's something trying to get the altars shortened because it was just too massive, or Paul just thought it was too big. But Marty Stahl then in the 60s, there was oak hardwood laid in the sanctuary. And it was laid around the oak altars. We've often talked about taking the carpet out and exposing the oak hardwood. We'd have to do some major work with that. And then we had a tile, the style of the tile, artificial cork tile, and sort of a beige with lighter and darker wainscot in medical about cork.
Okay. Okay, you're on.
Okay, as long as I can remember, there's always been a crack right here on the ceiling right here. And the reason why is that the masonry of the church is an 18-inch solid brick. So this section, this first 18 inches goes all the way to the roof of the main church. Okay, here in the sanctuary, this radius here is all put in, framed in with framing and plaster labs and plaster. So you have two different materials that expand and contract at two different rates. So that crack is going to be there forever. The only way that you could probably ever get rid of it would be cut it free and put an expansion joint and just put a permanent straight crack in it, you know?
Okay, if I may interject here a minute, the crack that Ben is talking about, what you're seeing on the screen, is to the right of the actual arch.
Yes.
It's barely visible to me now on the video. Okay.
Can you sort of show the different colors of the stained glass? You know, the odd colors before it gets too dark.
Okay. Would you like to talk about that?
I know we're jumping around, but it's going to be getting dark outside. We're not going to be able to see this. But some of the stained glass windows have odd colored panels. That's where the church was vandalized, and somebody had taken a BB gun and shot out a bunch of the stained glass windows. And they shot a few out in every stained glass. I mean, it wouldn't be bad if they just shot them all out of the same window, but they shot them out of one or two out of each window.
So the differences in the greens.
Yes.
Okay.
Especially like this one right here. This one here would be a shot out pane.
Okay.
There.
And in the red, the clear glass compared to the...
Yeah. See, like this one right here. That one there would be shot out one. Probably this one here.
Okay. All right. Okay.
This is the one that had a panel added. You know, the one to the left, lower left. You know, it's so much different. You can tell which ones they shot out. One whole panel had to be replaced. Trying to use the old glass as much as possible where they couldn't use it. Then had to just...
The one on the left was the replacement.
Yes.
Okay.
It looks like they can only use one of the panes of glass. The goldish glass.
Are the stained glass windows from the original building?
Yes, they are.
Okay. They've manufactured in the States, you know, or locally?
I really don't know the
Okay.
history of that.
Alrighty.
You're right.
We're going to talk about the altars now?
Yes.
The old altars.
Okay. The old main altar. Then I'm sorry for skipping around. We're not professionals. Okay. The old altars came within about, 2 feet, 2.5 feet from each side wall. They stuck out maybe 30 inches out. It was probably 10 feet high. There was a tabernacle in the center. The same tabernacle that we have now, what came out of that. The altars were hollow, underneath. You could crawl back in underneath the altars and store stuff. And we used to store the funeral candles. Back years ago, we would have 6 big black candle holders that would go in the first 3 pews on each side of the church that would be lit during the funeral alongside the coffin. Okay, just above the tabernacle was a crucifix, which was a gold crucifix made out of steel. And there was 2 angels with the wings sort of standing out like so. And then above that, there was the Sacred Heart statue, which is now over in the hall.
And I believe those angel statues are in the CCD classroom, are they not?
Before we got the new nativity, they were put out with the new nativity. I don't know where they're at right now.
Okay.
They're either there or stored away with the nativity.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, when the new altars were made, the steps actually came out to about right here. When they made the altars here, they cut the straight platform off, and they took the steps and brought them back to the wall. When the steps were out here, this is where the servers would kneel. You'd have your mass cards laying on the floor in case you forgot your Latin. Chimes were on the right. And then at the appropriate times, when the server would ring the chimes, you'd ring 3. There's 5 chimes. You'd go 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. So when the father would, you'd ring with that big offertory. You'd ring when father would hold up the host, and right before he would say the communion prayer. But so these are the original original steps to the altar. Except these were out here, and this is where the servers would kneel. They would kneel on this step. And back in those days, you were expected to not move your head around. You're expected to have your hands folded to the front. If your arm would drop sometime during the mass, then the older ladies, and we're talking Adorite, would sure let you know after Mass if you were standing and your weight was shifting too much to one side or another, if your feet weren't planted and the weight, you were supposed to stand still, you were supposed to stand at attention, your hands were supposed to be up, and if something happened and your hands went down, or your weight shifted too much, or you had too much movement of any sort, then you would have been told by the lady that you just didn't do very well, and you were expected to do a lot better. And chastising by those ladies is horrible. And my memory is my father laying right building putting in the hardwood out here, putting beautiful hardwood in here on the steps. Everything was hardwood up front. And then when they moved the altar that was facing the other direction, when it was taken out, the chairs were put up, then it was cut off and moved back to the wall.
But before that happened, the old altars were tore out in about 1960, start from the right and go to the left. Okay, so just as soon as you received communion, you got up and went down the outside aisles, and people would come up, and while he was on the left-hand side, the right-hand was going up, and then he would walk from the left all the way to the right, start again, and while he was back on the right, the left would leave, and then it would fill out. So the priest always started from the right and went to the left, which made a nice even flow. And it was very rare going to communion at that time. And not taking one. And besides, wine was not an option. You know, so.
Okay, you're on.
Okay, the church had a pipe organ.
1950.
It was probably taken out in about 1950.
Because it was very far out.
Because it was so far out of tune, they felt that they'd never get it back in tune. It was a huge organ, and the pipes were on the back wall. Up to your left, where above where Jesus is in the back, is where the Christmas stuff was always stored. We'd get the piece of plywood down, and the nativity scene would be on it. At the end of Christmas, after the kings came, we would take everything and pack it in boxes and put it in the window there, and put the piece of plywood back in front of the window, and that's where it'd stay until the next year. The same piece of carpet that went over the plywood.
Okay, and the current organ we have now, when was the date again when they moved the organ from the choir loft to the front of the church? But you remember the organ always being in the choir loft until the 60s?
Probably. I think that was moved down while I was in the service, which would have been 67, 68, somewhere in there. I think when I came back from the service, it was down.
All right. All right, we're in the sacristy now.
Okay, Father John Benkowski built these cabinets. Father John was about one of the biggest handyman you ever seen. He just loved to work with his hands.
At the center cabinets as well as these outer ones?
The whole cabinet unit here.
Okay. Looks like they may have two different kinds of wood, or is one painted?
One's painted, and the center cabinet is mostly poplar. The only Father John is probably recycled, you know. But I thought it was the neatest cabinet, you know, that there ever was. So, you know, okay, we have a place here for chalices here, and you know, just for all the different things you need for mass. And here's this thermometer, and all kinds of neat cutty hooks that thick stuff. We got matches in here. All the different parts of the investment.
And I think if I remember correctly, if you could open the chalice cabinet again, weren't one of these, or I don't know if these are the ones that were made by Rudy Conzen for Father Paul out of wood from...
I think all the wood were made by Rudy.
Okay.
I'm not for sure, but I'm sure they are. I think, especially the reds were specially made by Rudy.
Okay.
Rudy is quite a lathe operator. He's made several things off of these lathes and donated it to the church. But this is the original crucifix that Father John put there, and these cabinets were probably built in probably 1952.
Okay.
Okay. In the sink over here in the corner, back when I was a server, you just had cold water, and the drain just the only reason that sink was used just to get water for mass and for the priest to wash his hands, and the drain just drained out the side of the church. It just run down over the hill, you know. I mean, and that was the only plumbing in the whole church at that time.
Now, is this the carrying crucifix? Is this the one that you two gentlemen used when you were boys here at
Yes.
church?
The processional crucifix. Matter of fact, Jackie just told me this weekend that it was broke, and they had just welded it together here, and it fell over and broke right here, and they just had it redone.
I bet you that brings back memories, huh?
Boy, it does. Between you wiggling the camera and me wiggling across, it's gonna be one blurry picture.
Okay, we're on the outside of the church now.
Yeah.
Francis?
Okay, John Sherrill, he's a good friend of mine, went to Tech High School. He was a fabulous mason, and the brick deteriorated over the window, and he was in charge of relaying all this brick over the window. It was all deteriorating, and they fixed the window here, and then on the steeple, but all the coping was all metal coping, and it all had to be painted. We were talking the other day about being in the bosun chair, and it was his workers that got in the bosun's chair and came down and painted all the coping, which was metal at that time, and you know, it was quite a task. Well, actually, quite a thing to see. Really beautiful. And then all I thought this was all the white stonework was really something until I was about 40 years old and found out it wasn't stone. And so all the white stone here is not stone, it's all metal. And that's why we have to keep on repairing it.
As a young child, I remember the roof being a slate roof, and the louvers on the steeple were like a tablet.
Like the Ten Commandments.
Yes. And then up on the upper part of the steeple, there was a design in the slate. They looked like the three rings for the Holy Trinity was on each section of the steeple, and it was actually very pretty.
Now the steeple's covered with shingles, right?
Yes, and it's been re-roofed twice within my lifetime, at least.
Then when they replaced the chimney and put up the metal chimney, I thought what was interesting is that the roofing went up to the chimney and then restarted after the chimney. And when they knocked off the chimney, they found out there was 5 rows of roofing on one side and 4 on the other side. But it was quite a thing to measure, to meet up the roofing when you had 5 going in and 4 coming out. So it's quite a thing. Remember when Dad was, Dad's the one that took down the chimney. It was up there, and they said, well, how are we going to get it down? And he just went up there and kicked it off. It all came tumbling down. But, you know, things happen, and so many memories here at church. One that amazes me is over here. They were doing masonry work under the church, and when I was a little boy, I was probably 5 years old, and they mixed their mortar right here, and I was a little bitty kid, and I was just walking, looking at the clouds, and I looked and I fell face first right into the mortar. Father John Bonkowski, he just quietly wiped my eyes, wiped my mouth, took my picture. I remember seeing it as a little boy, but it vanished in his memories. You know, the memories and everything is just tremendous. This has always been our modern bathroom facility. Back when I was younger, the window was here. The door was around the corner. The door didn't have a fancy knob like this. There was a glass knob. And when I went into the restroom, the knob broke. And I was locked in the restroom. I was locked in the bathroom, and I remember looking out this window right here, and I saw my family leaving, and I know it was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had in my life. I was a little boy. I could barely stand up on the place you sit down, and I was looking up there, and I was barely able to stick my head out the window, and I saw my family leaving, and I thought I was trapped in the bathroom forever. But I wasn't. I made it out.
And again, this was an outhouse originally, right?
This was, later it became a bathroom, but this was a fancy outhouse with the one hole and just just the ground there. So that was our fancy bathroom back in the ages.
I'm going to pan back here to the community building so we can have it on the tape. It's a beautiful, unusually warm 82-degree April day today. There's that sun, the water tower behind the church. The benches.
The benches these are the original steps of the church.
Oh, okay.
What happened is that the steps came up before there was any concrete up here. You'd have a stone, and then you needed it to rise, so that you would put an upper piece here, and then you'd put the next piece up, and that's where the original steps of the church came. They were over here for a long time, right by the door. When we extended the walk over here, it came over here.